Hello, 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 everyone. All of one of you out there. And actually, that one might be Steven.
Yeah, it probably is me.
Me posting the... Yeah, it might be, at least the live stream is easy to do. It's one button to do.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, like, do we keep doing it or not?
Oh, I got you.
Because yeah, hi.
You finished Octopath yet?
No. Oh, man. So, I finished two last chapters. One was a chapter 5, and one was a chapter 4.
Okay. So
And
not all of them have chapter 5s.
no. And one is still like a chapter 3. Chris.
Hey, what two people hate Apple? I don't know who you're talking about, Chris.
Um One has a chapter 3. That's like I think the end of her path.
Oh.
But she had like 3 chapter 2s. It's weird. And apparently there's stuff after all the chapters have concluded. What I can gather.
God, it sounds like a 120-hour game.
I mean, I'm at
You're at 80 something, right?
70 hours, I think, in the game.
Wow.
So I finally hit like the bosses were like now, in my opinion, now it's starting to get hard.
Okay.
Like the chapter 1s were like, I forgot how easy Octopath 1 ramps you into JRPG. Like it starts off super easy and it slowly ramps you in. And that's how this game has been. And for the chapter 4 for this character, the boss, it's like it's the dancer, and it's like a dance competition where you like fight the other enemy dancer. So it's really goofy because like and the people watching thinks it's like the most epic dance ever, but like
But you're beating the
you're
hell
just
out
beating
of
the
each
shit
other.
out of each other in like in the turn base. So like she has like the enemy or the boss, I guess, has like 80,000 health, which is like the most I've ever seen in the game so far, right? You beat her and then it's like, oh, that's just the beginning. Here's phase 2. Start all over, different attacks, different everything. And I'm just like, and you like inspect again, it's like 100,000 health. You're like, fuck! That was like an hour and a half battle. And I lost it twice. Like in
Oh,
the
that
second
sucks.
phase, halfway through the second phase. And you have to start all the way from the first phase again.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
Octopath 1 did one thing wrong, in my opinion. I have a rule when I play JRPGs. I fight every battle, no matter what.
Yeah.
If it's a regular battle or whatever, because what I've found is that if you fight every single battle, that's the pace that the developers thought you would do. And
Yeah.
so you stay on top of things. And what that means is like bosses will still be challenging, but they won't be super hard.
Yeah.
And I tried that with Octopath. I fought every single battle, and there's still bosses that are too hard. And like mainline bosses, and I mean too hard as in like any RPG is actually easy because all you have to do is grind, and then it's not hard anymore, right?
I don't Octopath, even the first one's like this. Leveling doesn't really make you that much more powerful level to level. It's more about the equipment which a lot of times you have to have a level to like get to those areas to get the equipment sometimes, or just have the money to get it. So like grinding gives you leaves, which you can go buy equipment, right?
Yeah.
So I would agree there. But I'm finding like, at least in Octopath 2, more so than 1, is having to combo stuff together more often.
Yeah, and
Like, and
Octopath
thinking
1
like,
really it focused on that too.
yeah, really thinking like 3-4 turns down the road, having a character that has the right boosted attributes, and then being able to combo that with a debuff on the boss, so you can actually like, and then also syncing up breaking the armor at the right point too, so you have enough points left in all your turns left in all your buffs.
It's almost a puzzle game at that point.
It's probably more puzzly than any. I mean, there's probably more out there because I haven't played all of them, but this is the most puzzly JRPG game I ever played. Because like for me, Final Fantasy is like not that.
It's Final Fantasy for the most part is mindless.
I wouldn't say mindless, but it is very not Octopath. Whereas like,
I mean, you could almost every battle in Final Fantasy you can get through by just pressing A.
yeah,
And like you'll get through. And so like that's what I mean by it being mindless.
oh, Chris Craft, it's not like that at all. Like for all these, like, I'm in the end of the chapters for all these characters now. Like, the areas that you are in are, like, level 45 areas, which is, like, high level in that game. And so, like, you're fighting mobs that are not like you can just push through them. Like, you are having to combo the mobs, the trash mobs, to get to the bosses. And there's not really a easy, like, you can grind, but in Octopath you'd have to grind a lot to make your level matter, versus finding equipment matters way more in Octopath than your actual level. But grinding gives you leaves so you can go buy that awesome equipment. So there is that, I guess.
I just felt like Octopath 1 had, by the end of the game, it had pacing issues. Where, like, I felt like I was keeping in step with what the devs wanted me to do, and then it got so hard that I'd have to try things multiple times.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that.
I hit that more often in Octopath 1. Where
Yeah.
I would hit a boss I had to try 2 or 3 times compared to Octopath 2. I think because now I'm used to what Octopath's style of gameplay is. It is very much a puzzle game, and you can't just think 2 turns ahead, right?
You got to think more than that.
You have to think more than that. But the problem with thinking about more than that in Octopath is you don't see the turn order 2 times. Like, basically 3 turns down, you don't see the turn order. And it can change. So, it's one of those very... You kind of have to, like, guess sometimes, too, what the turn order is going to be down the road. Mm-hmm. Or try to make your tactic...
Or just hope for the best.
Or make your tactic not depend on turn order so bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, whereas, like, the chapter 5 for the other character was really tough because it was, like... And that was, like... So, like, the dancer one is honestly, like... The story is such, like, a wholesome... Well, I think wholesome. I think there might be ulterior motives I don't know about yet. That happens after. But, because, like, there's some alluding to, like... There's more to when... the dancer story concludes, right? But it's pretty, like, generic, like, the dancer wants to be a star, meets, like, her, like, hero. It's typically the don't meet your hero story kind of thing. And then they have a huge dance off at, like, the big festival that's worldwide. That's that story. The other one though is like the exact opposite, super anime. Like you're a thief that wants to be free, and you're a thief that wants to be free, so you have to kill like the leaders of your thief organization, the Thieves Guild, basically. You have to kill like them and get their keys to set you free. But it ends up they don't have the keys, and so you have to find the true leader. And the true leader is some like immortal being. It turns super Final Fantasy like, and it ends up being like, I don't know how much I want to spoil it.
I'm probably not going to play the game.
Okay, so the leader of the Black Snakes, which is this is the Thieves Guild, okay, is an immortal being that has been trying to raise children for beyond what he can remember to kill him. And apparently, like, your character is like the 5th one to show up, like, to get that far. It's like, it's it was all normal until like that point. That's this whole story. Chapter 5 hits because like they really throw you for a loop because like chapter 4, you think this is the end because you're killing like one of the, like chapter 3 you kill like what's called the mother of the group, and chapter 4 you kill the father of the group, and so you're like, oh, chapter 4 you're gonna kill the father. That's the end of her story, and then it's like, no, there's a chapter 5. And it's like, oh shit, what's this? And then it turns like super crazy. Like you show up and it's like weird time has been forgotten town basically that's like on the broken skirts of a country, and like all the people there are like really weird and act really weird, like their minds have just been physically like broken almost. And you hear like rumors of like through texts and stuff of like what's been going on there and like how long this place has been existing, and like there's like a folk story about like the people who settled that area. It's all crazy. But like, yeah, he's like I am all like, everyone is my child. And it ends up being like there's been like 50 generations of thieves in this guild that he's been trying to make the one that can kill him in battle. But it's like, why does that have to be the way that you die? Okay. They never really explained that. Super anime. But like, oh yeah, in the battle for that, he starts off like a normal boss with like 80, like 70 something thousand health. Lots of health. Okay. You beat him, and then he like turns into one of the like the chapter 2 boss. Full health and everything of that boss. Beat him. He comes back, right? You have to like battle him for like 10 turns. And then he turns both into the mother and father, which is the chapter 3 and chapter 4 bosses at the same time. And you have to fight both those at the same time. And then he comes back and you have to kill him again. That one only took one pass through though. Because when you refight the bosses, you're like, oh, I know the mechanics of these bosses. I just have to go through the motions and do the right, I'm not having a sight read, the attacks.
Yeah.
That was the problem with the dancing phase 2. It was like, it got to the point where like that boss could have like 4 attacks in a turn. Like 4 individual attacks. And I'm just like, this is just insane.
Yeah.
So basically what it was, to beat that one was wait until, because basically what happens is that I would start phase 2 and you do a bunch of like, nuke attacks, and it would trigger some threshold in her code, I guess, that would make her be able to start doing the 4-hit attacks, and then you just would have no more ammo left, and then she would just kill you. And so I did the exact opposite. Is I chipped her down until I knew my nukes could kill her. So I was able to kind of skip that part of her programming, I guess. I can't wait to see what, like, the Steam Engine Chapter 5 is going to be like. Or Chapter 4. I think it's a Chapter 4.
That's a Final Fantasy thing, stealing from Final Fantasy 6.
Oh, Steam Engine? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I
You
told
gotta
you about the
suplex
Steam...
it.
Yeah, I told you about the Steam Engine boss.
Yeah.
That's such a cool boss. Like, because it kind of, like, flipped the whole mechanics of the game around.
Yeah.
The bosses are... I'll put it this way. The bosses are so much better in Octopath 2. And actually, the whole game's just better.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, did you ever actually beat the the true boss of Octopath 1?
No.
Dude, that was... So in Octopath 1 at the end, when you beat all the chapters, it says, you're done! And then it drops you back in the world. And, like, if you talk to some people, there's, like, rumors of, like... I can't remember anymore. But you end up, like, finding this, like, giant door. And you go in, and it's a boss rush. So you have to beat all the bosses in the game in a row with the same team.
Oh, jeez.
Okay? And then there is the final boss, which is like the big bad. And apparently it kind of glues... I don't know if you got that in the first game, but like, even though like all the 8 stories were separate, there was a kind of a puppet mastery kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
And that basically this is like the puppet master.
Got it.
The big bad evil.
Galdera.
That sounds correct.
Yeah.
That was... I think I got to him and I set the game down for like 6 months because I was just like, what? No, impossible. And then I just read some guides and sat down and powered through it.
Wow.
Because that boss is... Because you have to do all those bosses and then him.
Like every single boss?
Yes.
Because that's like 20 bosses before him.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. I wonder what the end of Octopath 2 is going to be like, because there's even way more bosses than that.
Huh.
And the stories are already more interconnected.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
All right, we should probably kick this off.
Yeah. Let me turn off this fan over here. But yeah, Chris, I do hate when games are like that, where there's like... they call them skill checks. Which can be used in a good manner, but I don't think they get implemented well.
Final Fantasy VIII is a good example of not being implemented well. Like, it punishes you for increasing and doing well. So that game is almost a marathon of, like, getting away with doing very little.
Like the
It's
enemy
not-
scale and stuff?
The enemies scale, but they scale in a really dumb way. And so, like, it's better to run away from battles. And it's better to just, like, go... You can steal magic from enemies. So it's, in a lot of ways, it's good to go into a battle, steal all the magic, and leave. And not get experience, because that's bad. That game was broken.
Yeah, so like some... So yeah, actually, that one boss I was talking about, the dancer boss, would have basically like a... It's basically like a... in Final Fantasy 14, they call it like the rage mechanic. Was if you don't defeat the boss in a certain amount of turns or wait too long, like it becomes impossible. Like the boss just goes like rages. But I don't know if that's true with that boss, because I don't know if it's triggered by health or time or whatever. Because when I beat her, I did it so before she triggered that thing. So I wonder if it's by time, like turn time. But yeah, skill checks, health checks, damage checks can all be useful. It's just one of the how it's implemented. Because I know Final Fantasy 14 uses those a lot in their bosses. Same thing with like World of Warcraft use those a lot too. Where like you had to do X amount of damage in Y time, or like the boss like goes crazy or whatever.
One of the things I like about when enemies don't scale is it gives you at least a thumbprint as to, am I in the right spot or am I in the wrong spot in the game?
Yeah.
Like, if things are really easy, then you're clearly not advancing or moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, Octopath doesn't do any scaling.
Yeah.
So I will agree. I don't really like when enemies scale.
Yeah.
Or when zones scale, I guess, too.
Like, in games like Zelda, like the original Zelda, one of the ways you knew you were in a dungeon that was too advanced for you is you got your butt handed to you.
You died.
Like, you just died, right? And that's when you go, okay, I'm not supposed to be here yet. Or you get skillful and you just power your way through it by a skill. Like, I like that. That is great.
Yeah. Breath of the
Well,
Wild
okay.
is just like that, too.
The scaling that's done in Darktide is garbage. Where
Oh, yeah.
they make enemies harder, but then they take away your life arbitrarily. They just give you less life. That's stupid. That is not a good way to scale.
Well, the problem with Darktide is not so much the scaling, it's the ramp of scaling. Whereas, like, level 1s are honestly, like...
You'd have to try to die.
You got to try to die. Level 2s are also that in same vein.
Yeah.
Level 3 is like, okay, this is... You can... If you're not paying attention, you can die. But if you pay attention and you kind of work as a team,
you can goof off a little.
you can goof off. Level 4 is like, I don't want to know how hard level 5 is, because level 4 is impossible.
Level 4 is if you're not like team play perfect, like it's one mistake and you're out.
Yeah, it's one mistake and you are behind the entire game.
Yeah, right.
And it doesn't make any sense to have the scaling set up that way, because it's literally a hockey stick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a diode curve.
Diode curve, there you go. I guess you can say JRPGs are very like that too sometimes. Depends if you hit that. I remember playing Final Fantasy X and hitting that a lot. Hitting what Chris Kraft is talking about, where like you might be running around a zone and you're able to clean up the mobs fairly efficiently, and then you hit the boss and the boss like 4 turns you.
Yeah.
And you're like, what?
Yeah, that's bad scaling.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 1, like the very first one for NES, it wasn't linear, it was staircased. So like you would go to a new area, and the first time you visit that area, you'd fight a mob and you'd immediately have to go stay at an inn, because one mob was enough to just destroy. So you'd have to do that a few times till you leveled. Then you could fight 2 mobs, and you would do that until you, and then the boss would be really hard. And then after that, you'd go to a new area, everything would reset. 1 mob, 2 mob, 5 mob. You know, like
Yeah.
it was not linear in any way. It was awful. It was, oh my god, it was so grindy.
Yeah, that's how I thought, like, basically, like, when the boss hits you for the first time, you either go, oh, that's how this is going to be.
Yeah.
Or you go, oh shit. Yeah, because that dancer, I got the phase 2 was surprising, but it was like the first hit she did in phase 2. I'm just like, oh no, that was like half all my character's health in one round of her.
Yeah, then you start playing that game where it's like you spend all your time healing and rezzing, and then they do that attack again,
Yeah.
and then you're in a downward spiral.
Well, now they have abilities like shields and stuff, so you can kind of mitigate that damage, but you have to spend time to set that up, which takes time away from doing damage, which is, I think, why that phase 2 eventually kicks in, where she can do like 4 attacks per round, and it's like, you're just not going to live.
Right.
So you have to kind of like time when you nuke her in her second phase, so you can basically skip that part. That's what I did.
Got it.
I don't know if that's a good strategy or not, but it seemed to work. I can't believe that she can just like she was like, it was like you you can't just make the game harder by having more turns, and the boss is like, yes, I can.
Yeah.
Now I can nuke all your characters 3 times around, and one of those I get to boost myself. Let's start the podcast. I keep forgetting there's a countdown. About to like rip off right into the intro, and then I see that. Welcome to the Macrofab Engineering Podcast, a weekly show about all things engineering, DIY projects, manufacturing, industry news, and liquid hot lead. We're your hosts, electrical engineers, Parker Dillman.
And Stephen Craig.
This is episode 382. So this week we're going to talk about chip maker TSMC needs to hire 4,500 people. This has been big news this past week. Everyone is, at least in electrical engineering, is talking about that. Just today, or is it yesterday?
I thought it was today.
Was it today? Apple launched the Vision Pro AR headset, or I think launching is the wrong term. They announced they are launching this AR headset because it's shipping next year.
Yeah.
And then Steven has the Danger Pool
Project.
Oh, it's
Project Concept.
Project Concept. Yeah. So let's start with the chip maker TSMC. So this is building off of the CHIPS Act, which we talked about in the past, like last fall, I want to say. We talked about how the CHIP Act is going to basically require somewhere north of 600,000 domestic manufacturing jobs here in the United States. And this is kind of like, I think TSMC is like the first fab that's going to be like in the CHIPS Act that's actually going to be operational, because I think it's like 2024 they're going to be operational.
We've been getting pictures on our Slack channel of the plant as it's been being built, and it is gigantic.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy to see how much progress they're making in such little amount of time. Which the new plant's out in Arizona, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
But yeah, so TSMC's hiring 4,500 people to support these two fabs, and I think they've hired about half of them. But the big bulk of this article is about how the recruiting firms that TSMC are using have said it's really difficult to hire, mostly because of this. They are. The article's quoting saying it's like difficult working, like culture. The culture of work there is terrible. But I think there's more to that than just what the headline says.
Yeah, in the first paragraph of this, there's a quote of I cannot stress how brutal the work-life balance is here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the things that they quote is Glassdoor, and they compare TSMC to Intel for in the chip fab segment, and TSMC only has like 90 reviews, and like Intel has like 10,000 something reviews, but Intel's like 80 something percent positive, and TSMC is like 34%.
Oof, yikes.
But also, it's like there's a big size difference, and Intel does way more other things than TSMC does, like, in terms of like how wide their portfolio is.
100%, yeah. Also, something to keep in mind with Glassdoor is that somebody who people are more motivated to write negative comments than they are to go on there and write positive comments. So just keep that. There's always a bias.
Yeah, there is a bias, mostly because to use Glassdoor, you have to contribute to information, which is great. Most time when you go on Glassdoor, you're looking for a job, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And like I said, I mean, are you gonna just go and arbitrarily write a nice thing about your company, just out of the goodness of your heart, unmotivated?
Yeah. Or just to go look for...
Are you going to write one because you got laid off and you're mad?
Yeah, but like, why would you even go to Glassdoor if you're not... What information are you seeking when you go there to write a good review for someone to get access to that information?
It would be really interesting to know if there was some kind of, like, in general, add like 10% to the number that they say, and that's reality of how people feel about the company. I don't know what that number would be, maybe 10, 25.
I have no idea. But anyways, just the comparison to giant high-end chip manufacturers, startling difference. But I don't think it's really just that, though. I think there's more problems TSMC is going to face, and I think the big thing is compensation and hiring too, because I put it this way, it's like you routinely hear about SpaceX and Tesla of how difficult the work environments there are, and people are still like going to go work there.
Yeah, there's I've heard some murmurs about working at those locations, and the pay is high, but the pay is really high for a reason, because they work you to the bone.
Yeah, but that's what you just said. The pay is high. So TSMC is... oh, by the way, in these positions, we're talking like they're hiring master or PhD level engineers for these positions. So TSMC pays $160K roughly annually for PhDs with good experience, where basically that same person is earning $30K more at Intel. Wow. And Intel, looking at Glassdoor, probably has a better work-life balance than TSMC does. And really, when you look at it, basically TSMC has to hire away from the big chip fabs that are here in the States. There's not a whole lot of new people going into that space in the United States yet. We need to turn that around. Go listen to like last fall's podcast where Steve and I were like, people need to start like getting degrees in this kind of stuff.
I mean, 668,000 manufacturing jobs, right?
Yeah.
And a good chunk of those are going to be highly technical engineering jobs.
Yeah. So even if TSMC gets an interview and hires or gives an offer to these engineers, Intel is counteracting with like 10 to 20K over TSMC's offers too, to keep their engineers.
Just maintaining.
Yeah. And I think this partially stems from, there's a really good stat here where in Taiwan, there's 31% of students go into STEM. So much larger percentage of your population is going to STEM, so you have more access to that pool of knowledge, I guess, for students. Whereas in the United States, it's 17.5%, almost half, or less, almost half. In the opposite direction, though, because usually when you say almost half, you mean it's under, but almost half.
Right.
Connotations of English language.
Close to half.
Close to half. That's better. Yeah. I wonder what percentage of those, that 17.5% is like masters or PhD in engineering versus Taiwan's 31% too. Because I bet you Taiwan's is higher as well. Percentage of those that are getting the higher level education.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things Taiwan, one of the biggest industries is that over there. So just locally probably grows a ton of talent.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, that's just 31% of all students, right?
Yes.
But if we're talking about 17.5% of all students in the United States, that could be a much larger.
Oh, much larger number for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, United States is like what, 350 million? What's Taiwan's population?
Not 350 million.
23.5 million.
Yeah.
And I know it's not just that percentage, but it's actually, I wonder what that. Yeah, that would be what, like 4 or 5x this total number more in the United States. But also another thing to look at is the unemployment rate too. Like the unemployment rate in the United States is like 3 point something% right now. And I try to find like the information, like what about just engineers? Not even just engineers with masters and PhD, which is what they want to hire, but just engineers in general. And interesting enough, like the data is put together with agriculture professions. I'm hoping that wasn't like. I hope the stat is not like locomotive engineers is what I was looking up. But I think that was like 2 something%. And some figures I was seeing was like 1.7% unemployment rate for engineers in the United States. So it's even like less people are looking for a job too. So yeah, I think it will shake out. And that's what we were talking about SpaceX and Tesla. And what you were saying there was they pay really high wages because the work environment is tough. And they expect you to work long hours and that kind of stuff. But that's, compared to like working at Ford or working at, guess NASA. I'm trying to think of any other domestic
Ford's
rocket manufacturer.
So
what was that?
Yeah, Ford is unionized, so there's a lot of stipulations behind all of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm talking about their designers. I'm pretty sure the engineers at Ford are not unionized.
I think they are. A friend of mine actually worked there, and I believe that he was required to. And that was years and years ago. So it may be different now.
Yeah, it could be.
I remember him saying that you pretty much had to be.
Well, there's SAE International. I don't know if that's a union, though. I don't think it is.
Well, regardless,
yeah.
The compensation for the high stress, high hours job, the compensation is just extra money. Not just. There's a lot more to it, but that's one of the compensation.
Yeah, and that's how TSMC is going to have to solve that problem, but they're currently not paying more than the competition.
Well, and maybe they have a plan for that. Maybe their plan is, see how much we can get at the level that we're saying right now, and then once that starts to stall, they adjust their numbers and make up. However, it's saying that TSMC's hired less than half of the number of people that they need. But at the same time, the facility's not ready yet.
Yeah, they
so,
still have a year and a half to go.
Right. So, but then again, like I said, they may have to adjust how they're handling that. Because you also do have to consider, relocating people out to Arizona. There's some compensation involved in that too. In other words, are people going to want to live in Arizona? I'm not painting it as a bad place. I'm just saying, like, if you want a lot of high-tech talent, Arizona doesn't come to mind as that place. Like Austin, Texas, or Silicon Valley, or a lot of other places.
Yeah, I think it's mostly for the energy in Arizona. It's also really dry, which is great for chip fab. Now, they need a lot of water.
I was just about to say, we covered that before. You need boatloads of water.
You need boatloads of water. But the good thing about the water consumption is, I think it was something like 96% of that water is recycled. I think it's what we found when we talked about that years ago. That was back in 2018. No, actually, I think we talked about also again in 2020 because Taiwan at the time was having droughts. And so we looked into water consumption. But they do use billions of gallons of water. So even if you can recycle 99.99% of it, you still need 1 billion gallons of water to start.
Yeah.
So, it's gonna be interesting. I think not the knock. I guess I am knocking Arizona, but the episode of King of the Hill, where when they drive to Phoenix, Arizona for some reason, or is it they get off the airplane? I can't remember, but like Peggy Hill says, like Phoenix, Arizona is like it's like the hubris of mankind. It's like building the Tower of Babylon.
Oh, yeah.
Something like that. The hubris of mankind because how hot it was there.
Oh yeah. I think one of the. It's funny. My wife and I just finished about a month ago. Finished watching all of King of the Hill because neither of us had seen all of it. And the one thing that they get wrong, I think, in that, like, there's so much that they get right about Texans to the point where it's just really, it's very comical, and obviously that's one of the points. But something they get wrong is the family's always outside. The family's always doing things out in the sun, and only rarely do they mention that it's so ridiculously hot. Like, that's usually not how Texas is. I mean,
No.
Don't get me wrong. We spend a lot of time outside, but that they did so many things outside where I was like, that's not Texas. They would have been doing that inside.
Well, not just that, but it'd be like, you go outside and the first thing you say as a Texan, boy, it's hot outside.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, that's out of the way. Now it's time to do whatever and mildly suffer through it.
There's a few things in life that require that, and saying boy it's hot outside, or like when you strap down something to your truck or your trailer and you flick the strap and you say that ain't going nowhere. That's required. You have to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember stepping out of my car a few times and just going whoa, because like it hits you.
I just like when you step out of your car and your glasses immediately fog up.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have that problem, but
driving home and you're palming the steering wheel because it's so hot. Like you don't want to actually grip it.
But Phoenix, Arizona is a lot hotter. It's just a dry heat, but it is hotter there.
When we were in Vegas for DEF CON a few years ago,
Oh boy,
that was hot. Wow, that was next level.
I what always surprises me about Vegas, is because it's in the desert, and usually at the desert at night it gets cool, but the problem with Vegas is there's so much concrete that it just keeps the heat, and so it will be 2:30 in the morning and it's still like 92 degrees outside.
Yeah.
It just, at least in Houston, it cools down to like the low 80s in the heat of like August, the heat of summer. At least when it's in like it's like 81, 82 outside, you don't immediately just start sweating when you go outside. It's like you're like it's a little warm, but it's not too bad. But walking outside when it was 92 at night, it was just like, why?
Yeah.
I imagine Phoenix, Arizona would be similar because it's in the desert and it's all concrete.
Just hot. I never understood my Boy Scout troop back when I was younger. It always seemed to be that like summertime in Texas was the time that like all the big camps happened, and you know you're all super excited about it. It's like, oh, summertime camping, this is great, and then you try to go to bed for the first night out there, and it's 85 degrees, and you're just soaking in your own sweat trying to sleep. And I'm like, why are we doing? Why are we not camping in January? Like this would be so much nicer.
Oh, we camped once every month, so we did do winter camping and stuff.
Yeah, we camped in the winter as well. It's just we camped like probably 3 times as much in the summer. You know, there's
Yeah.
always just so much more. And yeah, I mean, that's just how scheduling goes. It's just, ugh. It was. There was a few times where I was out there in the middle of the night. I'm like, why am I here?
You're talking about that is, I'm remembering a summer camp where it was really hot, and for some reason, everything was covered in daddy long leg spider. They're not spiders though. What are daddy? They're like some kind of insect, aren't they? Because they're not
Yeah.
spiders.
No, they're. I don't think they're arachnids.
Yeah, they're not arachnids.
They're not. They're something else.
I've never seen that many ever again in my life because they were everywhere and in clusters. So you would get in your tent, and there'd be literally like 1,000 in each corner of the tent, and they would just leave. They didn't mind you, but there was you just knew there were 1,000 in each tent, and you would go to the mess hall, and there'd be thousands of them in the corners of the mess hall too, and just
Yeah, you just left them alone.
leave them alone. But you forbid that you actually disturb the what are we going to call them, swarm.
Yeah, I like that. Okay,
Oh,
I got a quick Boy Scout tangent story. That's
Another
in
one.
line with that.
It's the third
get
one.
this. Okay, so Texas is 800,000 miles wide, and so we decided to go to a campsite that was on the west side of Texas. So it was so far away that we had to camp to get to camp. Like we drove all day, and then we stayed at a campsite. We get to this campsite way late at night, probably like 10 o'clock, and the goal was go to sleep, wake up, just get back on the road. So our scout troop just rented this one cabin that was big enough to fit the entire troop. It was basically a big room with cots on the floor. We get in there, we are all super tired from driving all day long, and we just get in our cots and start to go to bed. And it's in the middle of the night. So there's this one boy in the Boy Scout troop who was just silent all the time. He wasn't necessarily a shy guy. He just never talked, like ever. He would like stand in groups with people and like participate in the conversation in terms of like nodding and things like that, but just almost never had anything to say. Well, in the middle of the night, we're all awakened to this kid thrashing in his cot, like just flailing about, like almost like a seizure kind of thing. Doesn't even say a word or anything like that. Someone gets up and turns on the lights in the cabin, and a scorpion like scuttles off, and apparently it had fallen from the ceiling onto his face in the middle of the night. He didn't even say a word. He just thrashed around and threw it off his face. And we're all like, oh my God, that fell on you. And we all look up, and the ceiling is covered in scorpions. Like, I'm talking about not like 2 or 3. We're talking about like probably at least 50 or 60 scorpions.
Oh no.
And not like little ones too. We're talking about ones like the width of your hand. So we had to spend like the next hour getting rid of scorpions just so we could go back to bed. And oh yeah, that was a hell of a night. But like that guy, even with the scorpion falling on your face, didn't even make a noise. Ridiculous. That's camping in Texas for you there.
Daddy long legs and scorpions.
Yeah.
I can't imagine if you were what the equivalent of a scout in like Australia would be.
Oh, they have like spider season over there.
Seasons?
Yeah. Let me look it
So
up.
instead of spring, winter, fall, summer, they have snake, spider, man-o-war. What else? Oh, emu.
That's yeah. Go to Google and type in spider season in Australia. It's like from a horror movie. Like the ground, they call it snowing spiders, where like the ground is just covered in web. And obviously, this is not all of Australia. This is.
I'm imagining like
a joke, but
because Australia is, I think, large. I think landmass it's larger than the United States or very close. I think it is larger. I'm just imagining like the United States covered in a big old spider web right now.
Look at these pictures. If you're afraid of spiders, don't look at them, because this is horrifying. The animals in Australia just are next level. It's ridiculous.
If you are from Australia, let Steve and I know how correct we are in our Slack channel.
I think they have a spider. What is it? The huntsman spider. That thing is. Oh God, I'm looking at a picture of it right now. I don't like spiders. No, close that tab.
See, for me, spiders are. If I see the spider, I'm okay with it because it's when the spider sneaks up on you. That's when I'm not cool with it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, spiders always sneak up on you. But if I see a spider like sitting over there or like on my desk scurrying around, like cool. Like I know there's a spider here, so if I feel something crawling on me, it's gonna be that spider. And I don't freak out. But it's when that you feel that crawly feeling, and you don't know what it is. That's when like your fight versus flight mechanic in your brain kicks off.
That's when you start thrashing.
Start thrashing around. Oh man. Yeah. Okay. We somehow went from chick maker TSMC needs to hire 4,500 people to thrashing about on cots because spiders and scorpions fell on you.
You never know what you're gonna get on this podcast.
Yeah, I would love to like do a flow chart of one of these like rants someday.
Trains of thought.
Trains of thoughts.
Train wreck of thought.
Yeah, the train wreck of thoughts. Yeah. Okay, so moving on, Apple announced their Vision Pro AR headset to ship next year. I think it was today, which is Tuesday, June 6th. Yeah. So it'll be a couple days after, or they announced it a couple days before this podcast comes out. So it's going to be $3,500. And when I saw that price, I thought I was teleported to back when VR was, quote, new, unquote, again, when the Oculus first came out. Because right now, I don't know where they're going at with this product. Because the VR industry is getting less expensive, and there's a hardware purchasing decline. Like, even the high-end stuff, which is the Valve Index. Is that what it's called?
That sounds right, yeah.
Yeah. The Valve Index is, like, the most expensive, or one of the more expensive ones, which it's also touted as, like, I guess that's VR, and this is augmented reality as well, though.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, that's the one major difference here is that Apple isn't playing the strict VR game. Yeah. They're really trying to augment, and they're doing the augmented reality or the mixed reality, I think is what
mixed reality
phrase they've been using.
Now, didn't Microsoft have something like this called the Microsoft. I want to say it's like the Microsoft Solo, but that is not it.
This sort of reminds me of, you remember back in the day the Google Glass and how Google was trying to say
Yes.
like this is how you're going to wear this all the time and it's going to change everything about the way that you see the world. This kind of I don't know, this seems akin to that.
Yeah. It's the Microsoft HoloLens,
Okay.
which was like a mixed reality for business. Oh man, when that come out like 4 or 5 years ago? Let's see, when's release? 3 years
Oh, the
ago.
HoloLens looks like Tilt 5.
Yeah,
those
it
glasses.
does.
It looks similar to that.
Yeah.
Oh wow, it's not cheap either.
No.
It's in the multi-thousand range.
Yeah. But what's very interesting about is, so the Microsoft product is clearly, this is what I'm going to get at with this, is clearly geared towards business applications, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they originally sold it on. Like, they had demos, like, you would wear it, it would show, like, instructions for you to, like, for your factory workers to, like, build stuff, or, like, you would show up on a job site and it would show, like, all your tasks that you had to do there, and then also show you, like, oh, go find a valve that looks like this. And so then you could, instead of having, like, look at, like, a piece of paper or a schematic, it would just show it in your, field of vision. Which was kind of like what you were saying with the Google Glass, which I thought Google Glass was a brilliant concept, except it got taken over by what was called the glass holes.
Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant because I would love to have been able to try it out and actually do kind of what the Microsoft HoloLens is doing. But you could do it for less expensive because the Google Glass was a less expensive piece of hardware. But Apple isn't doing that. Like, all their marketing stuff about it is like, it's all commercial or residential use. Like, one of the first things was like, oh, all of Disney's 3D movies will be on it. And it's like, no one is going to buy this to watch Disney 3D movies.
Yeah, by themselves.
Yeah, by themselves. It's a pro price, which is like the Microsoft HoloLens, but no pro applications were shown. And it does look like if you look at the HoloLens compared to the Apple Pro Vision thing, the Pro Vision looks super fragile. Like, the HoloLens looks like it could live like on a shelf in a warehouse.
The Vision Pro looks like high-end ski goggles.
It does look like ski goggles. But I'm just saying, like, the overall, it looks like it would break really easily, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it's a pro price with no pro applications, and I don't see, like, especially since the consumer market is already getting cheaper in that regard. Like, you have Tilt 5, which has Tilt 5 is a completely different kind of product too, because it uses that game board, the retroreflected surface and stuff. So it actually has a completely different market, I think.
Oh yeah, I was just saying that the Microsoft.
Oh yeah, how
look like that.
Yeah, well, it has like the see-through prism kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just in the consumer market, that stuff is getting cheaper. Like, I think the same year it comes out, like this year, like Oculus is releasing something that's like $500.
Yeah. I was looking at it just earlier today. Yeah,
Now that's VR, not mixed reality, but it's like, I could imagine, like, consumers are going to see them as kind of the same thing.
Absolutely, they are. And the thing about that is, like, what is the purpose of the mixed reality thing? Or is the expectation that you wake up and you put this thing on and you wear it all day long?
No,
until
you
go
wear
to
it when
bed?
you sleep.
Yeah, right. So the thing about it is, like, I think you're absolutely right. It's going to be compared to VR the entire time, and one of the main hallmarks of that is going to be the price point. So, $3,500 versus even some of the other ones I've been looking at are in the $500 to $1,200 range to do effectively the same thing. Now, there's probably people yelling right now saying, that the Vision Pro, does all these other, I don't know, because of its mixed reality, it's different in some way. But what I think your point, Parker, is that they're going to be compared to each other, and I don't see that being done well for Apple,
Yeah.
or I don't see the outcome being good for Apple on that.
It just seems like Apple is too late to the game on this.
Maybe, but I mean, like
They're
like you
either
said-
they're either if they were released this product, let's say 4 or 5 years ago for this price point, we would probably be okay at it. But the market,
Yeah.
it's like releasing a high spec or hobby level 3D printer nowadays.
yeah.
Like, you can't compete against the $300, $400 printers unless you go
Yeah.
to the pro market, and you're talking, in the pro market, you buy the pro. Yes, the pro printers outperform the cheap consumer printers all day, but this is like a HoloLens. It's a pro product, but it's just not. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. What's the worst thing that happens? It sells a lot.
Yeah, and actually, I was at Micro Center just the other day and walked by their 3D printer. Above and beyond like the hobby level stuff, Micro Center has a variety of 3D printers, but the whole thing is like they have them all available right there that you can just go and snag at whatever price point you want. It's right there. 3D printing's already at that level, and VR is too. At Micro Center, there was plenty of options for it there.
Yeah. So it's gonna be interesting to see who ends up buying this stuff and what gets developed for it. So it's gonna be interesting. I'm hoping for the engineers that worked on this, it's a commercial success and they all get raises.
I mean, it's an Apple product. It's going to sell a bunch.
Not always. There have been some failures. Remember
they've had some turds for sure.
the shuffle?
Which one was the shuffle?
It was the iPod with no screen.
Oh, it's just a stick you put
Yeah.
songs on. Did that not do well?
No, I actually own one, and that was actually my favorite MP3 player, funny or not.
Oh yeah, that was.
I like that one a lot.
That was the little cube, or
No, the
little
version
square
before
one.
that was like a stick of gum. That was my. Actually, I think that was the only iPad or iPod I ever owned. I liked it a lot because I listened to a lot of radio, and then in Junction, like, I use Pandora, which is like a shuffle function. So I was like, oh, I can actually put my own music on this and listen to it like the radio, because it would just serve up whatever's in there. But apparently people didn't like that.
I had an iPod. I don't remember what version it was. It was one of the earlier ones. I got it for Christmas one year, and it broke. And it broke not very long after I got it, and it was absolute garbage.
Well, that
And
sucks.
I was very upset about that one.
I actually have an MP3 player right over here.
Whoa, ancient MP3 players. Whoa, what is that?
A Surfans.
Huh. Okay.
Looks like it's dead. Oh, nope. Ta-doo.
Oh. Okay.
And it's got the patent Apple wheel on it too.
Yeah.
But this thing's great. I love because it uses like micro SD card, but yeah, I use this a lot. It's funny enough though. This I like using this over, even though it's thicker than my phone. It's smaller. It's like smaller than a deck of cards.
Yeah.
because it doesn't break as easy as a phone.
It looks robust.
Yeah, it's got the problem with it is it does have like it's a shiny plastic back, but it's a probably what cast aluminum enclosure. Oh, I like it a lot.
Yeah, nice.
It's gone through the washing machine once and survived. Can't say that about a regular phone. Actually, I bet you modern glued together phones can survive a washer.
Oh, I bet they could. Yeah.
Maybe not the spin cycle. Depends on where they get stuck.
I mean, if they're all bundled up in clothing,
It'd probably be fine. Yeah. But it also survived the dryer, which is interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Apple. Any more comments on Apple Vision Pro AR? I just don't think there's a market for it. I could be proven wrong, but
I have to admit I haven't watched the video on it. So I'm commenting on what I've read and just other commentary I've seen about it. So I need to go watch the video and see how they are presenting people using it. But just from the articles I've read, I don't get it. Or let's say I don't get it for that price point.
I would agree.
Then again, it's an Apple product, so
everything you on it is out of your price point.
I just don't get most of it for the price point. Most of their products. So. Oh well.
Oh well. All right, so on to the danger pool.
Okay, so I've been thinking about something a small project for a while now. In my own personal work that I do at home, I do a lot of through-hole soldering, and I've been getting to the point where I'm like, okay, I don't want to do this by hand anymore, just because of the time investment. And so I've, honestly, for about 2 years now, I've been on and off looking at options for something small for my basement that I could utilize for faster soldering than just individual points on a board. And there's a lot of options that are, like small tabletop wave solder machines and things like that. And I like that. It's just they're bulky, they're a little bit power hungry, and you have to just store this gigantic machine. I say gigantic. It's moderately large for what.
Are we talking about like a refrigerator sized or bigger?
What's a good? A few bread boxes. Let's see.
So it's even smaller than I thought. It's like 3 microwaves then.
One lawnmower size.
How many football fields?
Yeah, 0.046 football fields. Actually, that's probably a lot smaller than that. But but yeah, so for the price point, like I don't. It just doesn't really make sense. On top of that, if you go look for small reflow ovens, all you really get is the super Chinese ones, and in the sense that like I'd be a little bit wary of purchasing that. So instead, I've been toying around with making a dip solder, basically homemade dip solder device. Which, by the way, if anyone's laughing at me right now, like I totally deserve that in terms of thinking about making a dip solder device. This would be a very dangerous thing, so just keep that in mind as you listen to what I'm about to say here. But the dip soldering typically involves a molten pool of solder that you use some kind of tool to dip your board in. You hold it in the pool and then pull it out and then clean things up. And there you go. It's a very old school classic way of soldering. In fact, there's a really great YouTube video about a manufacturing facility that made transistor radios in the 50s, I believe it was.
50s, yeah.
And they just have this open vat of liquid solder or molten solder and a Ferris wheel contraption above it that they connect boards to, and it just spins around and drops them right in, or drops the bottom of the board right in, solders the whole board, and then, Bob's your uncle. And so, in thinking about that, I've been toying around with the idea of like, could I make my own that suits my needs? And you can buy dip solder, standalone things. The biggest problem is I need a big one. Not necessarily like gigantic, but I need one that's big enough for my boards, and my boards can be up to about 17 inches long.
That's
So
two footballs, by the way.
Yeah, gigantic. So like it's not hard to find a relatively large dip solder device, but I haven't been able to find one that is big enough for all of the boards I want. So okay, all of this boils down to like, could I make a simple contraption that is some kind of a heating element, some kind of a vessel, and a frame that allows me to control the temperature and do some dip soldering. Well, I started off by actually doing heat calculations on solder because I wanted to see like, okay, would a stove burner be enough to melt what I'm looking for, or to keep a pool of solder liquid? Because I've seen some videos of people just legitimately take cast iron skillets and throw solder in it and then put on a stove, and although that's somewhat fun, I wouldn't put any solder in anything near anywhere that I eat. So I wouldn't, like, it wasn't even in my mind to do anything in a kitchen area. But heating elements and like portable stoves are really easy to get. Could you rig up some kind of a contraption that heats up a giant pool of solder to the appropriate level? So I actually went out and got a bit of data on 6040 solder. I chose 6040 because it has a low melting temperature, and it's easy to find data on it. So the idea was, how much energy would I need to heat up 5 kilograms of solder? Which 5 kilograms at first seems like a lot, but it ends up not really being a lot when you need a whole pool of it. I'll go into a little bit of that later, but I started off with 5 kilograms just to see what we're looking at. So specific heat of 6040 solder is actually pretty low. It's 0.173 joules per gram Celsius. And the melting temperature is 190 degrees C. So if we say we want to start by getting the temperature from room temperature, which I chose 25 C, to go up to 190, if you do the specific heat equation on that, you find out that you need 142, let's call it 143 kilojoules of energy to get to that level. And then that's just the amount of energy you need to get from room temperature to 190 C. Once you're at 190 C, you need to then basically break the bonds to actually melt the solder. So you need the, what is it called? Enthalpy of fusion. So there's an extra chunk of energy that you have to put into to overcome the melting bonds. And that has, for 6040, it's 37 joules per gram. So if I do all my calculations right, the amount of additional energy to get it to melt is 185 kilojoules. So add those two numbers together, you end up at 327 kilojoules of energy in order to melt 5 kilograms of 6040 tin lead solder. The thing that's interesting about it, I didn't even plan for this, but 327 kilojoules is almost the same number that it takes to boil 1 gallon of water. So to go from 20 degrees C to 100 degrees C for 1 gallon of water is 330 some odd kilojoules. So the interesting thing is, like, knowing that, you're in the same ballpark range, like, just that knowledge right there is like, okay, well, we do that regularly on the stove, which means that a heating element is probably enough to melt 50 kilograms of 5 kilograms of solder. So if you're looking at 330 kilojoules, a joule is a watt per second. So how many, if we just arbitrarily choose 30 minutes as your melting time, how many watts do you have to continuously dump into the solder in order to melt it within 30 minutes? And I found out that you just need to sustain 182 watts of power into this chunk.
It's assuming you're not radiating heat back out.
That's the key element there. That's you're delivering 182 continuous to the whole thing, right? To the whole volume of
The system.
solder. Yeah, to the system, which is never going to happen, right? But that at least gives us a baseline of what's required to do that in 30 minutes. So I went out and just looked at like, okay, so kitchen stove burners, like what do they output? So a small one is around 1,200 watts, mediums are 1,500 to 1,800 watts, and large is 2,500 watts. So in other words, they're already like 5x the margin that you need. So like you could radiate like a huge like you could not deliver an enormous amount of your total energy and still end up melting this stuff. All of this calculations was just there to ballpark like how hard is it to melt a huge chunk of solder, and the answer is really easy. The biggest difficulty is the volume that I'm looking at, because I need, my boards are sometimes up to like 17 inches long, so I really need a vessel that's like 18 to 20 inches long and a few inches wide. Like it's fairly rectangular, but if you took two heating elements and put them on a PID loop with a thermocouple into your molten solder, I think it would not be hard to make a vat that is controllable. And the thing that's interesting is the size of the vessel that I'm looking at. I kind of arbitrarily chose 500 millimeters by 175 millimeters, which is almost 20 inches by what's 170? A handful of inches. The thing is, 5 kilograms only fills this to a depth of about 6 millimeters. So that arbitrary number of 5 kilograms that I chose initially is kind of not enough. I think I'm going to actually need to fill this with about double that, like 10 kilograms, just to get a thick enough solder to be able to actually put the board in with leads hanging out of it. But even if you double the amount of mass you have in there, it still effectively only doubles the amount of energy you need to put into it, and in other words, doubles the watt requirement in there. That still ends up being less than 400 watts of energy needing to go into it. So even the small kitchen stove burners are enough to deliver that. So all of this, all this calculations aside, this was all just there to be like, is it possible? And it seems very possible. So I'm going to play around with it a little bit and try to design something that could actually work with this. Because I think for a very relatively small amount of money, I could actually make a dip solder thing that meets all the requirements that I want. The biggest thing that people have probably been thinking about is like, how are you going to keep this safe? Because it literally is just a huge vat of liquid solder at 375 Fahrenheit. That's not particularly safe. So, I have to, that's actually, that part is probably going to be way more difficult than designing anything else in this, because it's literally just a hot plate with a vat of solder on it.
With a pot on it, yeah.
Basically, yeah.
My question is, what's the normal depth of a dip solder that's designed to dip a board into?
I don't know, but my gut feeling is it's beyond 6 millimeters. It doesn't need to be much beyond that, because most of the time you clip your leads before wave soldering or dip soldering. You clip them to an extent like maybe 2 inches below the board, so you don't really need a whole lot.
Now, with dip soldering, do you need to lock the leads in?
I don't believe you do. I actually haven't done it before, so I don't believe you do. With wave soldering,
you don't have to for wave.
I haven't had to in the past.
Yeah.
And wave soldering actually has physical force
pushing on it. Yeah.
Pushing on it. So, but my guess is you don't have to do
And I wonder if you have
really,
to circulate it at all or anything.
I watched a video of somebody doing it in a cast iron skillet, and they basically just took a paint scraper, scraped the oxide layer, dropped their board in, and it worked fine.
So they just scraped the dross off and just went for it?
That's it. And I was actually surprised they scraped the dross off, and then like kind of dawdled around for a little bit. They didn't just dunk it in right away, and it was still fine. Like my thought was you scrape it and you go right away.
Yeah.
But even then, it didn't oxide. It didn't grow an oxide layer so fast. And so with my boards being so long, I would be worried about bow, and not actually having to tip the board into it. There's a lot of challenges that come with that. So I'm actually ordering boards coming up here soon that I would like to use dip soldering for. I put mounting holes on four corners because they're so long, but also a mounting hole in the middle because I'd like to build a little jig that holds the board at the four corners and in the middle so I can keep it as flat as possible. And the jig allows me to hold something that's far away from the board that I can, be really careful while I dip it in. Perhaps there's some other jigging situations. Maybe I can even make something that holds it itself over the dip solder pot, so I don't have to put my hands over that.
Yeah, big old Ferris wheel.
Yeah, Ferris wheel or some kind of like swing arm or something like that I can just, be away from the pot while doing it. I also thought about potentially using furnace bricks and putting this into like an enclosed brick kind of system and basically keep it outside, control it off of your 220 volt line, and actually you don't with these calculations I don't even think you need 220 volts. I don't know what kind of what current draw I'm gonna need right now, but it just doesn't seem like it's gonna be as difficult as I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a small dip solder guy, and I use it almost mainly for tinning leads or tinning wires, and it's 300 watts for a little thing that's probably 2 inches, a little disc that's 2 inches, which seems way overkill now that I've done these calculations.
Yeah, but how fast does it heat up?
It doesn't take very long. Like, I used 30 minutes as my calculation, or as my time for this. This little device is way faster than that. So, but at the thing about it is, time isn't a huge issue for me. I wouldn't need this bath to be molten in 5 minutes. 30 minutes is totally fine. But then again, I could always just way oversize it and have it be 5 minutes. It doesn't seem like it would be that difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. This was the first steps. This was the napkin math steps to just say, like, could I just buy some simple heating elements, or even could I just buy some standalone stove elements?
What you could do too, if this worked out, I would put in your design a way, because you have a TIG welder, you can argon coat your bath.
Oh yeah, just like slowly leak argon to the top.
I mean, that's what wave solder machines, they have they use nitrogen because it's cheaper, but you already have argon.
Yeah.
And you just slowly leak argon across your bath, and it'll just stay there. I think argon will just stay there, like nitrogen does.
Yeah, I need to. How much is a nitrogen generator? They're not cheap.
Those are not inexpensive. I've looked at them before. Been looking at getting one for the fab.
You can't get a little desktop nitrogen generator.
No,
right?
No, they're pretty big, and you need a big compressor to run them on too.
Right.
Because you got to compress the air, and that uses I think they're membrane driven, so you need a big differential to push the non-nitrogen through.
Isn't the atmosphere something like 70% nitrogen?
Yeah, that's why membrane diffuser works really well.
Yeah.
That's actually the downs. That's why carbon scrubbing is really hard to do. Because it's easy to like use a membrane to get carbon out, but there's actually not a lot of carbon in the air overall. So it's really hard to like get any meaningful carbon out of it. We talked about that with the Porsche new fuel stuff.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, I should check on that, see where they're at. See when I'm gonna start running recycled gasoline into my cars. I think the danger pool. I want to see you build it, and like it works really well. And I was actually thinking, like, for the vat, that's about the size of my ultrasonic cleaner.
You know, I haven't picked a vat yet, but the vat is more about safety concerns than it is material.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't want something to be super small, but just something that can sit at 190 degrees C.
You're gonna want stainless.
Yeah, and I would like something that has a lip, such that I could mount it to something, like secure it. Like I said, if I were to make this out of furnace bricks or something of that sort, something that I could drill into and hold it in place and make a nice sturdy frame. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't looked too much into it, but the whole thing is it doesn't seem that difficult. And I can just get one of those PID controllers that I use with the brewery, assuming it. I actually don't know if they go high enough in No, they do. They do. Totally. You can get them to go high enough. It's not that they don't go. You just have to choose the appropriate thermocouple that can withstand those temperatures. So actually, one of the things that would be that I'd like to do with this is make a thermal well that goes into the vat. So the depth of the solder needs to be enough that it can support a thermal well and still be able to solder the board on top of that. So
you need like a 2-inch deep stainless rectangle,
kind of like a brownie pan, but a thick-walled brownie pan, basically.
I bet you can get one of those.
I would not. It would not surprise me.
Yeah, that would probably work. I think the safety aspect is also like, I would just wear like really heavy like welding clothes and stuff, and then really, really thick gloves that are heat resistant, and then like a full face shield and stuff. And then if you made your little holder,
you're fine, right?
I don't see a big problem with that.
I would wear a respirator as well, because you spray the bottom of the board with flux, so the whole bottom of the board is coated. So when you put that in, it'll go up in smoke. That's
actually the thing, is having a way to mechanically hold it in case you have to move, and so you don't drop it into your bath. Splashing due to droppage is actually probably your biggest concern.
Yeah, exactly. So a fixture or a jig that either clamps onto the edge of the board or mates with holes on the board. I like the idea of mating with holes, because then you won't fill those holes with solder.
Well, how are you going to hold on to it? Because the screws would get solder on them.
The screws might. I haven't figured that out yet. The screws might get solder on them, or will get solder on them. It's just perhaps they're not going to heat up fast enough to actually wet, I don't think, because it doesn't need to be in the bath very long.
If you use stainless bolts, fasteners, you might be okay.
Yeah,
and especially since you won't have a really aggressive flux that will make the solder want to stick that stainless. You have to use a really aggressive flux to make that happen.
That, and just the thermal mass of a big bolt. I just don't think it's going to heat up enough for it to actually stick. Yeah, the other thing is, I'm soldering a fairly large board, so I don't want to drop the temperature of the bath that much. So I may have to increase the temperature of the solder just before actually doing the dip. I don't know. There's a lot to play with them.
I think you'd make sure. What I would do is make sure your holder can't go into the bath. Meaning that it's bigger.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It's the sewer the sewer cap problem, right?
Yeah.
Which means you have to make it round then.
Well, yeah.
If you absolutely didn't want it to go in there. But I guess it's not that deep. You'll be fine.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I just need to play with it. Actually, the funny thing is the most expensive part of this is the solder itself.
Have you thought about getting one of those robotic soldering machines instead?
I have, yeah. This is more of just like, I don't know. This sounds fun. And
Yeah, I'm just saying it's
if
like
it was
from
a
a
failure,
production
it's not that much of an issue.
Yeah, I'm just saying from a production standpoint. Because you know what's going to happen. You're going to build this vat, and then in a year, you're going to be like, crap, I have a bigger board now.
Make a bigger vat.
Yeah. This is really reminds me of the big old bath of lye I had in my backyard for about a week.
Oh, for anodizing?
Anti-anodizing.
Oh, yeah.
Remember,
the
it was
etching step.
it was ripping the anodizing off. So I had we talked about this on the podcast 6 years ago. When I first bought the Wagoneer, I was polishing all the bumpers, and they're aluminum. And polishing anodized aluminum is like a futile effort because the oxide is so tough. But lye or basic solution will just rip the anodizing right off. And so that's what I did. But you have to make something big enough to hold a bumper. And so it was like a plywood rectangle with like a cloth, not cloth, a tarp in it. Worked great.
That's not dangerous.
It just don't. It's oh man, this is like when you look at the old like 50s and 60s plants and stuff like that solder bath. But like look at acid dip tanks and stuff that they use for like automotive facilities, where like they're taking an entire car on the assembly line and it just goes before paint. It dips into the acid bath, and it's literally like right there.
Yep.
And so, like, if you walked across the assembly line and the car just bumped you, you would just fall into the acid vat. And I did not make a crazy basic solution. Like, because I was like, well, I have to get rid of this, too, at the end. And I just used to clean all the pipes in the house. Did a good job.
Nice.
No clogs.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Turns all of the grease into just
Soap.
Just eats through it, right?
Turns into soap.
Turns into soap.
Bacon soap. Oh, yeah. So I'm going to bet you we're going to have a lot of people arguing this week about the danger pool, people defending Apple, and I don't know how many people will talk about TSMC stuff. We'll see.
Maybe we'll get another picture of the facility. That would be cool.
That would be cool. So that was the MacFab Engineering Podcast. We're your hosts, Parker Dolman.
And Stephen Craig.
Later, everyone.
Take it easy.
Thank you, yes, you, our listener, for downloading our podcast. If you have a cool idea, project, or topic, let Steve and I know. Excuse me. Tweet us at MacFab, at Longhorn Engineer, or at AnalogENG, or email us at podcast@macfab.com. Also, check out our Slack channel. You can find it at macfab.com/Slack. Oh, that just keeps going, doesn't it?
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. No, please, stop. Stop. Thank you.
I was really hoping at the end it would be that one dude that goes, woo! off on our assessment of what the hard. I'm just going off of what was advertised to me, Chris. What's transition 2? Ooh. In a world with Apple headsets at $3,500. Actually, I'm surprised they don't have like a brown sound effect in here.
The third age.
In the third battle, when the shadows first lengthened. I'm gonna listen to that this now. Oh, there's a... Huh. How do I get rid of that now? That's weird. There it goes. I'm just surprised the cheering went. It's a 32-second long cheer sound effect.
Can you add Doom music to it?
I can add whatever we want to this. We need like the shotgun, like the super shotgun reload sound effect.
Yeah.
Or we need the air horn as well. Okay, I think we got everything.
Rock and roll.
Let me check. Yes, it's upgrade complete. I'll see everyone in chat later. I know Chris is like, we're going to sign off, and Chris is going to send me like 4 messages on Discord. Because he's going to be like, see, in this video, this is where they talk about like pro stuff. I'm sorry, I'm not making fun of you, Chris.
You totally are.
No, I'm not. I just know that's what's going to happen. And I'm going to go look at it and be like, yes, you're right, Chris. But the stuff I did not watch the video. I read all the articles about it.
All of them.
All of them. And that's the thing. None of them are talking about the meeting stuff. The one we were looking at is the fierceelectronics.com article about the headset. That's the one I based all or most of what our talking points were. Nope, because you won't watch them. Well, I won't watch the video, but if you send me articles about it, I'll probably read them.